Jumanji, the next level. The kids are back in the video game world. Never explained why Spencer decided to take the console they intentionally broke and try and fix it up. They just kind of hand-wave it, like, I don't know why I did it. Like, of course you don't. Why would ya? The magic of the whole Jumanji thing isn't really well defined, and that gives them leeway to do some stuff without having to explain it, but at the same time, it's like, if you don't have set rules, it's just like the writers doing whatever they want just so the story can happen, and it feels too convenient. That at least is a danger. I liked The Rock acting like Danny DeVito and Kevin Hart acting like Danny Glover. That was fun. It was a nice change-up from what we saw before. The chemistry is Kevin Hart and The Rock. That helps, because these two do have pretty good chemistry together. Spencer was feeling down on himself. He didn't think he was good enough for his girlfriend, and so it was straining their relationship. He wanted to be The Rock again, but, just to change things up, and when Spencer's friends find out that he went back into the game, they decide that they need to go out and help him. Spence's visiting grandfather, recovering from hip surgery, and his grandfather's friend gets sucked in too. The added obstacles here aren't just that the older people don't understand that they're in a video game by ambiguous magic. It's also that the game itself has changed. There's a new villain, a new mission, and even additions to their characters. And so we do get some of that learning curve again that we saw in Welcome to the Jungle, but some new stuff that comes into play later. I liked the cast here. We don't really get a whole lot of Danny Glover. A bunch of the actors playing the game avatars do kind of change up who they're acting like, basically. Ruby Roundhouse takes on a couple of different players. First it's like the average girl, Spencer's girlfriend. I can't, most of these characters, I can't remember their names. I remember Spencer because, they said his name so many freaking times. So you have some comedy with, like, Jack Black, acting like a young black guy who's upset that he's a doughy old white dude. And then he's back to acting like a young woman who used to have too much of a fixation on, like, Instagramming herself. You have Aquafina, who plays a new game avatar that Spence inhabits for a while, but eventually, she does her Danny DeVito, and she does a fairly good job of it, too. They brought back Nick Jonas's game character, and he's actually the only game character that sticks with the guy that's playing as him, even though he's only in it in the last fourth of the film, maybe last third. And then there's this horse that the cheerleader inhabits. I don't know if she was actually a cheerleader, but, the cheerleader type. And it's like, that was just kind of weird. Then later, Danny Glover's character inhabits the horse, and he decides to stay in the game. Was Danny Glover just not available for later shoots? Or something? So they're gonna keep the game going for how long? Because they don't do anything with the game after they get out. If they manage to somehow destroy the game, does that kill off Danny Glover's character? Or does he just magically transmute into a different avatar in the Jumanji world now that he's magically stuck there? Or does he get released at some point? I don't know. But it's like, I can understand how that could be viewed as kind of a happy ending, but we're dealing with a magical entity with no clear motives or intentions. It just raises a few puzzling questions. We saw that, a restaurant that Danny DeVito's character and Danny Glover's character used to own and operate is owned by a woman named Nora, played by Bebe Neuwirth. I didn't really remember this because I hadn't seen the first Jumanji in a while. She was in the first Jumanji as the aunt of the orphaned children, and I forget what her job was then, but I guess, like, since Alan Parrish time warped and everything. She became a restaurateur. There's a repairman coming to fix something in the basement, and he's, oh, look, it's a game console that's opened up. I'm a big fan of game consoles. And even, like, Spence's mom says, you probably shouldn't touch it. It's like, the guy decides to touch it anyway. And then, then we get the sequel bait of a bunch of Jumanji animals running down the street. And, I wouldn't be opposed to another Jumanji. I mean, if the entire adventure is about these game animals and avatars popping up in the real world, it does kind of harken back to the first one. Then we might get The Rock and Kevin Hart and the others out in the world without, like, these player personalities to work off of. That could be interesting, but given that Welcome to the Jungle kind of pointed out a lot of absurdities and peculiarities about video games of the era this is based on, then it might be kind of like, haha, obvious joke, haha, obvious joke, haha, obvious joke. I thought it was fun. I think it's just as good as Welcome to the Jungle. The cast work well off each other. The ambiguity of the whole Jumanji magic thing does kind of work in its favor here. Stuff like that green water that helped them swap bodies did feel a skosh convenient. Like I said, odd questions about Danny Glover deciding to live his life as a video game horse that can fly. What's this, you ask? Why, it's my whoopin' stick. Why do I have my whoopin' stick? Because I'm going to talk about the last movie I saw in the theaters in 2019, Star Wars Rise of the Skywalker. This is just in case. Right there. While I have enjoyed some games, some cartoons, and some movies in the Star Wars franchise, I've never been so in-depth as to want to know, what was the origin of Han Solo's jacket, or, the bandolier Chewie wears, or that pen that one guy used, or, I've got to get every single action figure, and that means getting that action figure of the one dude in that one scene that appeared for 3 seconds. While I understand why some people didn't like elements in the new trilogy, they didn't really bother me, and I think some people are blowing those elements out of proportion. Not to say that these movies are perfect. No, I think the Canto Bight scene, the Space Vegas scene, if you will, could have been trimmed down. I think they could have played that a little differently, but I do think it does play an important role. I think Linkara does an excellent job of explaining it in his review of the Last Jedi comic adaptation, which, as of this recording, was a few weeks ago. It was very insightful, and I think a lot is supported in the movie to substantiate it. I'm not one of those people that thinks Rey is a Mary Sue. I do think that they dropped the ball a couple of times in growing her as a Jedi, but I don't think she reaches Mary Sue qualities. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration where she's concerned. I can understand why this movie's divisive. I didn't hate it, personally. I wasn't in love with it. They did do things I didn't like. Bringing back Palpatine was one of those things where it's trying to appease the older fans, but I don't think they did it quite right. I think that maybe if instead of Palpatine, it was Snoke, that would make the whole clone angle make a bit more sense, seem a bit more necessary. And at the end, when Rey's, dead or practically dead, and Ben comes over and gives up his life force to save her. I mean, I heard one recent criticism like, Rey didn't use her powers to restore him. Well, it would have been kind of like a ping-pong effect. It's clearly like he had to sacrifice his entire life to save her life. And while I understand the objections to it, they did decide, let's do a redemption arc for Ben Solo, Skywalker, whatever. Like, okay, they want to redeem him to some level. That would have been fine. That's fine. I don't mind that. But I don't see why they had to make out. Like, okay, you had that goofy little scene where he was standing around, shirtless, after taking a shower, and she's like, could you put on a towel? And it's like, okay, yeah, that was funny, but that's hardly the basis of a solid relationship. I just think these characters worked better without the even possibility of a romance angle. Just, it was tacked on, it was pointless, it was silly, and could have done without it. I did like that they added in some actual training for Rey. I think we could have used it earlier in the series, but I understand what they were going for with Luke being gone. And I did like that they, added in some flashbacks of Luke training Leia, so it gives better context to Leia training Rey in the ways of the Force. I did like the scene where all those ships of all those people coming to fight the Final Order, kind of that whole camaraderie going on. That scene where that woman that Poe knew, she's flying, she's giving it things like, and then Babu Frick just pops up like, ah! It's like, that was like comically awkward. It did kind of like affect the moment, and not in a great way. It's like all of a sudden, there's Babu.
Hello!
Babu! The best way I can say it is that it wasn't a perfect movie, and it probably wasn't the ending to Star Wars anyone was really looking for, but it didn't end with a bang. It didn't exactly end with a whisper or a whimper. I didn't hate it. My brother hated it, but I thought it was okay. I don't really have much strong feelings about it. So I'm going to cheat just a little and want to talk about some movies that I didn't see in the theaters and one or two I didn't see in 2019, but they were from 2019.
Veering a little off into the direct-to-video department, there's Justice League versus the Fatal Five. In many ways, a kind of follow-up to Justice League Unlimited. Not just that they have the DC Trinity voiced by George Newbern, Susan Eisenberg, and Kevin Conroy, but also the design style is pretty much just like Justice League Unlimited. They do bring in a few new characters, particularly Jessica Cruz as Green Lantern and Miss Martian. There's also Starboy. They do bring Mr. Terrific in. That kind of came as a surprise, and a pretty welcome one, I'd say. I've never been a big follower of the character, but when I do see him in animation, it just seems like he's a potentially interesting character, and it's nice to see him get a little more spotlight in this one. So this is about Starboy from the Legion of Superheroes following a couple members of the Fatal Five into the past. He apparently has some manner of brain injury or something that makes him lose his memory without proper medication, and because the medication doesn't exist in our present, his past, others are wary when he tries to warn them of the threat. But his struggles coincide with that of Jessica Cruz, who is, I guess, the only Green Lantern on Earth at the moment. Jon Stewart is off on a mission, I believe, and she has some psychological issues of her own, in particular survivor's guilt. The two of them bond over their troubles, and it could have easily just gone in a romantic direction, but I don't think that's what they intended. I think it was really more like two people who need support, supporting each other. And I kind of prefer it that way because it's rare for us to get a relationship like this that's pretty much platonic or professional, where, yes, you can say that they care about each other, but it doesn't need to take a romantic or sexual avenue because it doesn't help the story. I liked the action in here. I liked the story overall. They gave Wonder Woman a sword, which I thought was a nice touch. I can't think of anything that I particularly disliked about it, but it did kind of feel like an extended episode of the series that, maybe had some more blood than the old show had, and maybe mild cursing here and there. So if you enjoyed the Justice League cartoon, I think you'll get a kick out of this. If maybe they put a bit more into the budget for another one like this, maybe make the story a bit bigger, involve some other more obscure Justice Leaguers from the show, like they did with Mr. Terrific, I would definitely pick up a movie like that. Because usually I don't buy these DVDs right off the bat anymore, but this, I had enough faith in the creative team and the people involved that I was going to be entertained at the very least.
Detective Pikachu. I have no real interest in the Pokemon franchise. I remember demoing Pokemon Snap, and that seemed fun enough, even though I didn't really care about the characters or anything. That being said, this was surprisingly entertaining. You don't really need to know anything about the world to, enjoy the humor in it. I do think they do a fairly good job of blending these fantastical animals in with a real world setting. It does kind of delve you into their world in that way. Ryan Reynolds is enjoyable as Pikachu, even though you could argue he's kind of doing like a PG Deadpool in some respects, without so many fourth wall breaks, but some self-aware humor, to be sure. I was never bored. I liked the characters. The villain was kind of obvious, but at the same time, they kind of took steps to kind of throw you off course and then direct you back to, oh yeah, it definitely was him. Kind of a nutty villain plan when you think about it, but given the source material, I mean, it's kind of a silly cartoon, so if this was entirely animated, straight from Japan, maybe not so much the American-style humor, but definitely the villain plan would have probably been untouched. But again, not too familiar with the franchise, or at least its inner workings. But yeah, it was surprisingly entertaining for something based on something I don't care about and don't really have any interest in. Saw Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. My brother texted me months ago saying he watched it and he thought it was fun. And I'm like, yeah, I guess it's possible. If I was going to choose one of the crossovers to do a movie on, I probably would have leaned towards the 2012 Turtles meeting Batman, the animated series Batman. But of course, that opens up a whole new can of worms I don't think anyone's really prepared to deal with. There were times it was very lighthearted, and then it got really graphic. Like, not just like a blade to the head of a foot ninja that spoke too much, but like dismemberments and so forth. It's like, geez, man. It's kind of like a very stark contrast to some of the humor in this. There were some lines of dialogue taken directly from Tinian's story, word for word. They did improve on the story in many respects. I think they took his concept and they made many improvements, along with several deviations. Instead of this whole interdimensional conflict thing, it's like they just exist in the same world, just like any classic crossover, which I reviewed in my second season, like Spider-Man and Superman, or Spider-Man and Batman. And then there was this sudden, musical reference, "Creature, leave that kid alone!" Like, I forget what band that song is from, but it's like, it came out of left field. But yeah, I enjoyed the voice cast. I liked that we didn't have another pit stop to see where the Waynes were murdered. I liked how they did Raphael. It's like he's admitting that he storms off to go out on his own, and he always gets his shell handed to him. And he's aware of this. The turtle designs threw me off at first. It's like, especially Donatello is very odd looking. But, it didn't really bother me while I was watching it. I liked that they didn't just, like, cut away from, oh, Batman's gonna fight the Foot Ninja. Cut away! Stuff like that happened a few times in the story. But, no, we saw Batman fight the Foot Ninja. We saw Batman fight Shredder a couple of times, and he didn't need any mech. They did not include Master Splinter, which, depending on how they play Splinter, like, if it was anything like the 2012, or just like, maybe, or something like Iroh from Avatar, The Last Airbender, it's like, that would have been fun to have. Maybe an older ninja master teaching Batman a thing or two. But the movie did fine without him. It was enjoyable. Don't know if I wouldn't be opposed to picking up the Blu-ray or getting it as a gift or what have you. It was pretty fun. Batman Hush, based on the Jeff Loeb story about a new villain in Batman's roster. Now, this also came with several deviations from the source material. Some of them were to integrate into this shared animated movie verse. Batman needing Luthor's information. I think Batman could have found the information himself, but hey, we had to be reminded that Reign of the Superman, Luthor is a provisional member of the Justice League. Then there's this scene with Damian warning his father about using protection. I didn't find it as funny as some people would, but I guess to remind us, Damian's here. I thought that the relationship between Batman and Catwoman was pretty well done. Evolving it into now they both know each other's identities and taking it to another level. Faint possibility of Batman being happy. But the big thing about this is Hush's identity is not Tommy Elliot. His friendship with Tommy Elliot gets touched on a couple of times, and then he dies, and Batman goes nuts, but it's hard to feel invested in it. Bruce says that, he helped me out when my parents died, and so forth, and it's hard to really feel that connection when he doesn't have that much screen time. They did better than what they could have done. I do think it was established fairly well, just not as good as it could have been. Hush turns out to be Riddler. And as CinemaSins pointed out, and the CinemaSins thing is a good portion of the reason I watched this in the first place, it's Riddler went into the Lazarus pit. That's supposed to completely heal him, but he still has the question mark scar on his forehead, so what the deal? I don't know, maybe there's some detail about the Lazarus pit that was established in either this universe or whatever, but it's a minor thing. Riddler didn't even get that much screen time before this was revealed. They mention he's a C-lister, but and his motivation is that, no, I'm a bigger, badder villain than everyone thinks I am. Now he's using these villains and getting revenge on Batman. He's going to kill Batman and prove himself, and it just didn't really click to that degree. One thing that really confused me is going to the Lazarus pit gives you temporary insanity, and yet Riddler managed to find out Batman was Bruce Wayne. That was just weird. I mean, given that Riddler is a smart guy, I guess it kind of you really strain it could kind of make sense, but it just feels very just teetering on the brink of willing suspension of disbelief. Hush has never been my favorite villain. What's Riddler Hush? Maybe they just really wanted to surprise people. I'm not 100% sure. They basically killed off two villains at the end. What breaks up Batman and Catwoman is that he was determined to stay in that collapsing building in order to save someone who was out for blood. I can kind of see how that would break them up. I do kind of like it better than her saying, hush, before making out with him, and he's like, why did you say that? And just, that always felt kind of awkward to me. It wasn't bad. I don't know if it would be a buy, but it was entertaining enough. It had decent action. The voice cast was fine. The twist is just kind of I don't hate it, but I don't love it.
Lastly, we have Dragon Ball Super Broly. This is kind of an extra cheat because it technically came out in 2018 in Japan, but, 2019 in the States. So, I'm counting it. This is a follow-up on the series, so that makes the story and Broly himself now canon. I did enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a little different from some of the past movies. It's much longer, for one thing, and we have this kind of prologue of sorts that takes up 20-odd minutes, so it's kind of like an episode unto itself that takes place before the destruction of planet Vegeta. It seems to take from, and this is what I'm gathering from watching Masako X. I've kind of been watching his channel for a while. It incorporates what's known as Dragon Ball Minus, which I guess is kind of a retcon of the hows and whys of Goku being sent to Earth are different from even what was established in Z, so I guess Toriyama did a great deal of retconning. We also see Goku's mother, and Bardock has lost some of that hard edge he had in that one special, which I can understand why some people would be opposed to that. I don't particularly mind. We see Frieza formerly promoted to Emperor, and I always find it weird how some of these alien characters just don't age at all. Like Zarbon, Dodoria, the Ginyu Force all show up, and they don't look any different from when they were fighting on Namek. Saiyans are portrayed different as well. We see one guy that is nervous about being off planet because he's not a soldier. Same goes for Frieza's various lackeys. Most of the time we see them, they're just ruthless bad guys. They're doing what they're told. They don't really care about anything else. And you could chalk that up to Frieza just being an intimidating monster. But you have Chi-Lai, who looks like a green-skinned, white-haired young woman that, she stole a car, now she's hunted by the Galactic Patrol. So she's, trying to protect herself. She's not really a fighter, but she's not a horrible person. She is technically a criminal. The older guy that she's accompanying throughout all this, he seems more laid back. There's even a remark like, oh, Frieza's forces must be desperate to take people like us. So it is kind of a ramification of the fact that Frieza was dead for so long, and he's trying to rebuild his empire. But you also see that, there's this one drunk dude that tries hitting on Chi-Lai, and you have that standard, girl's not interested, so the big guy that all the fans immediately think, well, now they have to be a love interest thing, steps up and gets the guy to back off. So, they make them a bit more three-dimensional in some respects. The humor is very present and maybe sillier than what some people might expect, especially when you hear what Frieza wants to wish on the Earth Dragon Balls for and how strikingly similar it is to Bulma's wish. And considering Frieza's demeanor over the years, some people might not like it, but I think it's kind of fun. They justify it in a way. We don't get a lot of the supporting cast. Other than Vegeta, Goku, and Bulma, we don't really stray to many other characters associated with them. There's a little bit of Beerus, and there is some Piccolo, but no one else for the most part. And honestly, other than just being there to either fend off cannon fodder or get smacked around by Broly, there wouldn't be really much for Gohan or Krillin to do. Broly as a character is vastly improved. He has, more history, more development, and a better motivation than when he was a baby. He heard baby Kakarot cry and now he goes nuts whenever Goku's around or whatever. Even Paragus is fleshed out better than in the original legendary Super Saiyan movie. The fight scenes are done very well. There's some interesting choices of colors when Goku and Vegeta transform that Moscow X again has some theories on. If you're a fan of the Dragon Ball franchise, I think you'd enjoy this one. The effects and the colors are really, really good. The action is done very well. It would be nice to get some kind of follow-up, preferably, a continuation of the Super series, but it has been on hiatus for so long it might be done with for good, or it might be changing in some other way. There's been no news. But as far as I know, there's been no news on continuing the TV series or another movie. So even if they were to announce it today, it'd be in a year before it'd come out in Japan and probably another year before America. And I'm someone with a preference for the dubs.
That was my 2019 movie list. And to help get ready for the new season, there's one more change in store. And this one's been a long time coming.
Jealous?
Well, no, we've got the same chair.
You're probably wondering, is there anything special in store for this season? Well, you know how they say that no great artist ever repeats themselves? Well, I don't consider myself a great artist, so I'm just going to do a sequel to my second season with Year of the Crossover 2. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.